Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are watching on YouTube, you'll see a little link down below that will take you to Zoom. If you get to Zoom, you can see a little link down below that will take you to Mukana, and you can ask questions, hang out with folks, and chat with them. And it's a lot of fun. We'd love to have you. If you think that you can actually, if you watch this and you think, I could add something to this, I know more than these jokers, then come in early. You just have to be here by 6:40 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you're not sure you're ready, you can be here as early as 6 o'clock and come in, check out your check out your kit, check out, get to know everybody a little bit. So you're more than welcome to come in a little bit earlier and hang out, but you need to be here by 6:40 a.m. Pacific Standard Time to get on the panel. First hour is all general Q&A. So it's whatever you put in there. So your questions drive this conversation. So if you're in Mukana, keep asking those questions, both the questions that you like the most up so that we can make sure that we get to them first. We spend a little more time on those. Second hour is about something specific. So something that we've decided is important. So today we're going to talk about recce's, as it's said in some parts of the world. But basically, going out and doing site surveys and what you want to be thinking about when you go out and decide you're going to do an event at a specific location. So we've got, of course, tomorrow we're doing education in the second hour, and then we have the third and fourth hour, which are Zoom OSC, which we're really excited about. So that's what's coming up this week. And yeah, Bill, let's take it away.
All right. Well, we start this morning with a very highly rated thing because we kind of pushed it up there because it's our friend Adjoa here in the panel who did a presentation and she talked to us about it. And TJ Asher is looking for Adjoa to give us a recap of the presentation from earlier this week. How did it go? And what did she learn from the experience?
I really appreciate everyone's advice and suggestions, the design efforts and ideas that I didn't even realize were inconsistent. So everyone loved it. Sometimes success can be a double-edged sword because all of the parents were scouring it for their children's name, and unfortunately I left out a couple of names, and so I had to pay the price and get yelled at for that. But it was very positive. It was very uplifting, especially at a time like this when a lot of kids are feeling very unseen and isolated. They felt appreciated. It was a family thing. It was live on YouTube and people were commenting and engaged. And that's one of the things that's missing in education. So thank you so much I learned a lot. I learned about adding audio files. So we added a soundtrack. There were so many different directions I was trying to figure out. Like I wanted to do an independent soundtrack and have everything, then I thought about doing a video but then, just eventually figuring out you can do so much with PowerPoints. I remember Alex taught me that so many years ago, Keynote, I guess I shouldn't call it PowerPoint, with different slide decks and things like that. So it was fun. It was really fun. Thanks.
This is how it begins. This is the first one. We have to have Adjoa talk about the first one because in a year, she's going to have motion control cameras and she'll be running Zoom OSC tied into QLab and we know.
Well, if you come out and start a school with me, a multimedia school in Vallejo, like I've been asking, we might actually have that. That'd be great, Alex.
All right. We'll talk about that more. All right. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, the point you made, and that was a legitimate and serious point about doing things in school situations and things like that. When I was doing stuff for Mike's school when he was in those years, if you came and did an event like a choral concert, the idea of making sure that every kid has a close-up, try to work it, or at least if you're in the back of the audience, making sure that every group of 2 or 3, so that every parent can go, there's my child, is hugely important.
Next question.
Moving on to John Pruitt of Huntersville, who says, I'm planning on ordering a new Blackmagic Design 6K camera next week. I already have a bunch of Canon lenses I can use, but I need a good, very budget-friendly lens for it. Less than half an Alex. Any suggestions?
Go ahead, Jason.
That's a tough one. Half an Alex would be $350. So I would say maybe the fixed 50. Like the nifty 50 at like a 1.8 or a 1.6 is going to be a solid lens. The hard part is focusing it, especially when it's wide open, but it's a cheap lens and oh boy, does it look good.
I think that if I was going to use it as a webcam, I'd probably do a 35, but a fixed. I think at $350, the 35, I find it is just the right length for most people for framing, for webcam, so 35 millimeter camera, on that 35 millimeter lens on that camera. Because remember, it's got the camera's got a little bit of cropping, so it's a super 35 instead of a lens that's built for full frame. So anyway, so it actually is closer to 50. Anyway, so I would probably look at that because of that multiplier. You can get, but I would spend a lot on that prime. But under $350, I would stick with primes. You're not going to get anything that's a good zoom for $350. If it's less than $350, it's a zoom. It's going to be variable aperture, doesn't go wide open, you're losing most of what you get out of that camera by putting a bad lens on it. Next question.
Tony Mobley of Newman, Georgia. Our friend says, is it possible for Jeff Francis to demo audio control settings using just the ATEM Mini?
I guess I'm up. So the ATEM Mini has 4 HDMI inputs and now 8 with the Extreme, and we have 2 TRS 1/8" inputs. So if we look at the ATEM control software, the very first place you need to think about is in the gear setting, and you go to the audio page, you have 2 settings in here. On the general page, you can choose if you have a line input or a mic input. So this changes from consumer level line to mic level with power. So you see I'm talking through mic input number 2 and I have it set as a microphone. And then if you go to the split audio, I've actually split both of those. Instead of being a stereo input, there are 2 mono inputs. And that will change the way you see things here on the mixer. I guess you can see my face up there in the corner. So I've split mic input number 2, and you see there's my mic input, and I have a preamp gain. So when Mickey asked me for a 2 dB more, I simply went to this input control to add a little bit more gain. And then in this setting is my delay. Oops, that popped up on the wrong screen. One moment. So you see this is a frame delay, and there are up to 8 frames of audio delay available only on the analog inputs, not on the HDMI inputs. So I'm adding 2 frames of delay to match my picture coming in on HDMI number 1. Below that, I have an equalizer. So I'm just doing a simple high-pass filter to remove the lows from my voice, and I'll turn that off, and you can tell me if you hear any difference of adding in any lows to my voice. Generally, that's the first step in any kind of voice processing, is just to cut out the lows. Simple high-pass filter. If I remember correctly, these are 12 dB per octave. I'd love it for it to be steeper, but it's not. Then I have some dynamics processing. So I actually have both expander and gate. So when I'm not talking, you see that the gain reduction kicks in to drop the room noise down 15 dB. And when I am talking, I'm just kind of taking out, as if I get excited, it's going to reduce my level slightly, just to keep my level of my voice more even throughout those things. Moving down through the chain, you have your fader. That's your overall mix for everything that's coming in. A pan control, which doesn't do much in office hours because we're probably listening in mono most of the time. And an on button, that's your on off. And if, one second. Well, I guess I could just switch over here. There it is. So that on off control is tied in with these on off controls. The ATEM for the audio inputs, and then audio inputs for each of the actual HDMI inputs. And then the last thing to talk about is the AFV, audio follow video button. So I have a Hyperdeck connected to input number 3. I'm actually going to turn that down so it doesn't blast you away. If I turn on audio follow video and I press play, you see that there's sound coming in, but you don't hear it. I can manually turn it on from the front, or with audio follow video, when I switch to that input, you begin to hear that audio playing. Give me a thumbs up that you actually heard audio playing. Yes, all right. There are, in the headphone controls down here, which are not active in this ATEM Mini, Pro because it doesn't have a headphone output, but I imagine we'll see that in the Extreme that these headphone outputs will work. Did I get everything?
That's great. Yeah, and it's really, really, really good example. And it's why I think it's such a travesty that they don't have balanced inputs into the ATEM switchers, is because they have so much control in the ATEM switcher. Like the switcher has all of this control, and then it's got this weird little pipe that goes into it. I mean, Jeff's definitely taking full advantage of that process, but it's that's again why I feel like.
So for each of the HDMI inputs, you get an input level at the top. So it's not a microphone preamp, but it does give you an input level that you can trim things back. And then you get equalizer, dynamics processing, so compressor and expander.
Can you split out if an HDMI has, I guess it would only come in with 2 channels, right? Can you split each one of those?
No, it's only this. Wait, can you?
Yeah, you absolutely can.
Yes, you can. Okay, so you can. So you see if I click that button, now you see there are separate left and right controls for camera.
And what's interesting about that is that theoretically, I mean, I think this is the way to, kind of build up this mixer if you wanted to, is theoretically with the new camera, you would then be able to bring in 8 inputs individually and do all the dynamics and everything else within them, into the switcher by plugging them into the cameras. It's just a little bit of a wonky way to work. Go ahead, Roscoe.
I want to show the audio delay too.
I think you did. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yes, I did show that earlier. So only on the analog inputs, there's the input trim, which if it's a line, is just a trim, but if it's a mic preamp, it's the mic preamp gain. And that's this setting up here with a level, control, and a readout. And it's very easy to actually type in a number. So when Mickey asked for 2 dB, I just typed in 2. And then if you click right below that, there is your delay settings. So up to 8 frames and go back to my picture, you'll probably see that I am out of time now. Because I've delayed.
Try 3 frames. You got it at 2. Try it at 3.
Okay, so there's 3 frames. We'll see how that looks right there. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers.
Try 4.
So there's 4. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers.
Try 5.
Don't see a change.
Not seeing a change.
I
Peter
do.
Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers.
Say it one more time.
5 is too much.
Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers.
No, try 6.
Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers.
Try talking just a little bit more. It's hard when there's too many pieces close to each other.
Too many pieces too close to each other. Sorry about that. I'm also wondering sometimes if I've got too many inputs and too many video outputs of my 2013 MacBook, it begins to slow down. And so that does affect video frame rate going out.
Because it still looks like the audio is ahead of video just by a hair.
Just by a hair at 6 frames.
But I don't know if it's making any change. It shouldn't be 6 frames. Because it did look like when you were at 8, it looked like it was higher. Anyway, this is like one of those pre-show things to do. Is not necessarily spend the whole time doing it. Anyway, but it's fun to play with there. But it does seem like it's cool. It's a lot of power in that little mixer. Let's go to the next question.
Moving on to Doug Ferguson in Fort Wayne, Indiana this morning. With all the new versions of Zoom Client, it would be good to chat again about the preferred best practices for setting up remote clients who don't have good microphones.
Send them a microphone. Like, I'm sorry. Like I was trying to wait. I was trying to think through, like, how do you deal with good? I mean, usually there's not a lot of great ways to fix an onboard mic, and so there's not. You can have them do the best they can, but it's the only thing I would say is that you can try to fix their room, so you can put things that are softer around them. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I'd love to hear Jonas's perspective, because he had let me know yesterday that some of his fellow students do a mic check themselves before going in front of the faster because he said that they wanted to sound their best because he was concerned about first impression. So, Jonas, you want to open up on that?
I mean, I obviously have figured out a setup with a good microphone, but lots of them are using like their earbuds and just get the microphone near their mouth, so you don't have lots of room noise. That's probably the best test.
Yeah, I think that we were more understanding when we didn't know that we could buy a mic for $30 that would fix 80% of the problems. You know, like I think that's when we became much more, you know, for $30, people spend that on their t-shirts, you know, that they, you know, or a shirt or something like that. And this is how you appear to everyone now. You know, like it's, you know, I'm in a hotel room. I traveled to LA. I came with lights. I have a meeting after this. I came with lights. I have a headset. I have a, you know, because I'm talking to a bunch of people that are going to make a lot of important decisions, you know, and so it's just not okay to just open up your computer and do it. If you want people to respect what you're saying, it's really just not okay anymore. Like it's, you know, we're past that, and we're not going back. Like I think that people don't understand that, like, this isn't some temporary thing. Everyone's moved out of state. Like I'm in Northern California. I was in Northern California yesterday. Like everyone's leaving, you know, and so they're going to keep having Zoom meetings. They're going to keep having, you know, meets. They're going to keep using Teams. They're going to use that more and more and more. And so, you know, for the people who want to, you get ahead. It gives you a leg up. It's like dressing a little bit better than everyone else, you know, gives you authority, gives you, you know, you're taken more seriously, and they may not notice it. That's the goal, is that they don't really notice that you look better or sound better. But they're listening to you more intently because you look, sound better. And so now we will turn down most jobs that we don't turn them all down for a variety of political reasons. I mean, you know, corporate political reasons. But we'll turn down most jobs if people say they don't want a kit. Like if they don't want a kit, I'm like, why am I working on this? So the, you know, because it's just going to be a mess, you know, and we're just not in the business of making messes. So anyway, that I know that I sound very hard in that area, but it's $30, you know, to get a mic system that is going to improve your audio quality by, you know, but that's why we want to get ahead of it. We, you know, at the last minute when they just show up, you have no choice. But it's not fair to the viewers, especially if you're going to do an event that has a lot of people. You know, you wouldn't walk up in front of 1,000 people or 500 people without a mic on a stage. That would be inappropriate. Anyway, next question.
Brian Bevito of Detroit, Michigan says, Alex and Guy, particularly regarding your prompter people discussion from yesterday, do you feel as though they, prompter people, make the most roadworthy and robust hardware?
Jason.
Ooh, okay. I really like prompter people. I really, really do. And I'm really excited about their small one, you know, the tiny, tiny little one. It's in pre-order. I don't have it yet, but yeah, I think Alex's general, like, you know, if it's smaller than, smaller than 12 inches, then go with ICANN. And if it's larger than 12 inches, then prompter people's pretty great. But oh boy, are they pricey.
Yep, Chris.
I just want to point out, prompter people is a brand name. We're not talking about prompter operators, and Jason is not talking about very diminutive prompter operators. Just
that's
so
right.
everybody knows.
Nothing against prompter operators.
I was listening to this going, wow, this sounds really weird.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at, I mean, I have to admit that I'm looking at between their, because I don't know if I'm going to get around to building one immediately. I'm looking at between their 24 and their 32. They actually have a 32 inch that they make. You know, for it, but I'm going to probably move my iMac out of where it's at right now in my house and then put that in, you know, to that. So that's where I'm kind of looking straight in, you know, to it. So, but it'll probably be a 24. And as far as roadworthy, you have to be very careful. Like when we mailed, at one point I owned probably 15 prompter people, between 15 and 24 inch. And we broke a lot of them. Like we just broke the glass. Is the hardest part is packing it so that the glass is maintained. And so, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I personally own 6 prompter people devices. That's my business, and they're absolutely fantastic. And to your point, Alex, about breakage, I have cut custom built pads that go on the glass to protect it, and then also protect the backside before I lay anything else on top of it. And I've shipped them all over the country with no problem whatsoever. I swear by them as far as their small footprint for packing, and they never get damaged. I've never broken a piece of glass in 20 years.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, when I bought mine, and I can't remember whether it was Prompter People or one of their competitors, but they had an acrylic option and as opposed to glass, and so I went with that, and it worked just fine for years, and it was a bit more robust than glass. And also be interested if Courtney has any ideas, since he's done so much prompter work.
And well, my prompters I've built myself 30 years ago, and I haven't had a piece of glass broken. Of course, I designed my own ATA rated cases, so the glass folds up and fits in a narrow slot with foam on either side. So there's no way for the glass to even move if the case is dropped, and they've been dropped many times. Our cases were designed when the main monitor was a CRT, so you can imagine sending something as fragile as a CRT and the prompter glass in a case, letting the baggage handlers handle it. So if you design your cases strong and prevent it from being crushed or having any room for the glass to bounce around within the case, because that can break the glass too. Just the G forces of the thing hitting the inside of the case can fracture that glass. But if the glass is mounted tightly, and it's kept from moving around within the case and prevent, of course, you got to prevent stuff from going into the glass in the case, but you shouldn't have any problem shipping them.
And I can see the difference between acrylic and glass is the part for me. Like looking through a camera, if I'm putting a $20,000 lens on the other side of that, I don't want to go through acrylic to get to the person. So that's the reason I stick with glass on that end. And we've often replaced them. If we see even a little bit of scratch on them, we'll usually get a new one. Next question.
Jeff Francis of Columbia, South Carolina is in with, is it possible to connect an audio interface, for example, a Focusrite Scarlett, to a Raspberry Pi to embed audio from XLRs into the HDMI output? One of the 8 inputs on the ATEM Extreme would be a Playoutbee source and have Pro Audio embedded.
Go ahead, Jonas.
It should be totally possible, since there are already DAWs ported for the Raspberry Pi. I don't know how far off the delay will be. That's something we would have to try, but it should be possible.
You go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I don't see why not, because even the low end Focusrites are going to conform to the stub drivers that exist in the Raspberry Pi's operating system. Your main issue would be sure that you don't, try to avoid phantom power, because USB 2, I don't care what anyone says, cannot supply proper phantom power. So if you're trying to drive something large, be careful.
Good, Mickey.
Yeah, I was going to mention something along the same lines, that the more capable Focusrite Scarletts require a specific Focusrite driver, and they don't utilize the standard driver. So just keep that in mind.
Next question.
Chris Fenwick, Sacramento, and the panel here says, Alex, what would your estimate be of how not having a session recorded increases the urgency of a crowd to being there to see it live?
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I think that I've kind of I think that because we make it interactive, if you make it interactive, there's a certain group of people that are going to come to the event. Like people who come to this, I mean, some people are just listening, but other people are interacting with it. We've got, and so the interaction is what makes it a show. And so I think that, you can definitely have it be recorded and be available later. The funny thing is that I think now a lot of people seem to like to listen to the show, so I think that it's fine. But I think that a lot of times things that are highly interactive may not be as good to listen to, because you're kind of just bouncing around. It's not really a produced show. But I think that for that kind of slow listening, where you're just kind of putting in the background while you're working or doing something like that, that a conversation is good. And so I don't think, I know I was in I sat in on a little bit of the Blackmagic training yesterday. They had a Blackmagic and Dolby did a Resolve, doing HDR, and I just wanted to see how they were doing the training. So I jumped into it. It was, it was just free webinar. It's a free webinar on Zoom. And the problem was that I kept on finding myself wanting to rewind. What did he just say there? And I admit, so here's the problem is, the webinar itself was too slow, and so I was multitasking. Like this is so, and this is what I noticed about it when I think about, because I look at everything through the filter of what would I do, you know, like if I'm going to do, if I did that kind of training, and that's why I went to watch it. The problem is that they were moving through the data too slowly, and so as a result, I started multitasking because I just couldn't sit there and watch the screen. I was getting agitated because it wasn't moving fast enough. And then he would say something important, and then I'd want to go back. I just want to go back and look at that thing. And what I was left with is I just really wish there was like a pre-build. There was a 10-minute video or 15-minute video that covered everything in the first hour, you know, because it really could have. You know, it was just kind of meandering around, and then it just pull it all in so that I have a 10 or 15-minute video that I watch, and then have Q&A. You know, like, and then I'd be happy to jump in and be engaged and listen. And I think that's the challenge is. You do want, when someone goes over something, you want to be able to go back and record it. And I'm glad we recorded yesterday's second hour. You know, I think that, so I don't think that the live, I think you have to create a reason for people to come to watch it live. And I think that reason, in my opinion, is interactivity. You know, like that it's, you know, you can record and put up a football game, but how many people want to watch a football game again? Like you watched it once, you know, like, and you might want to watch the highlights, but you're not going to want to watch the whole game again. You already know how it turned out. And so, so in the same sense, there is the interactivity and the conversation is what creates the urgency to be there. And then there's just a longer tail for the people who just want to listen. Go ahead, Sky.
I'm just curious about the rise and fall action of a story, that you give your audience a time to breathe, and then you, because you're faced to the fire hose, eventually you get numb and you can't listen anymore. So I hear your energy concept, but I'm just curious about where the rise and fall and letting the audience breathe at some point, like music.
I think we do that here. I mean, we talk about something you're interested in, then we don't talk about something you're interested in for a little while. Then we talk about something you're interested in. Go ahead, Joe, and then Bill.
Yeah, you know, I've been speaking to a lot of conference producers recently, and the question keeps coming up around interactivity, and they think what they're actually looking for is spontaneity. They've become so structured in the last year to be down to the minute. You know, your run of show can't be within 30 seconds and nobody gets a bathroom break and still have the kind of interaction that's happening here. It's all fed by audience, and I think that's kind of what's missing.
Yeah. I mean, I like at this point, I'm not even sure that doing presentations is worth it. You know, like more than a presentation longer than, like, I try to guide everybody that's going to come on to the second hour. Like, you got 10 minutes, you know, like just so you know, like, we're not going to, because a lot of people have something prepared that can go for an hour. And I'm like, we'll just introduce it for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, and then we're going to go into Q&A, or I'll lose everybody. And so I'm very clear that, you know, the audience wants to be part of it, and that's what engages them. Go ahead, Bill.
I'm on both sides of this issue. I love the fact that my son especially has grown up watching 3 screens at once. I mean, he'll watch TV, he'll be on a pad, he'll be on a computer somewhere. He takes in information in bigger gulps than I did when I was his age. On the other hand, I do remember that there are movies I've seen occasionally, and I don't even remember the name of it, but there was a foreign film a long time ago that had a flashback series of sequences. And there was a moment when you realized that in a shot of her walking away, that's the last time he'll ever see her. And the fact that the director held that scene almost uncomfortably long was, I thought, brilliant, because you had so much backstory to put into that walk away. So
you can definitely have it.
Is important.
Yeah, I think that you can. I think that you can do something that someone wants to watch for an hour, but it takes a lot of work. I think that for most people doing events, you don't have the money. I was explaining this to somebody recently. They were like, well, what if we want to have them watch for an hour? I'm like, okay, well, just remember that Apple or Netflix spends $75,000 a finished minute. You know, 1 minute, $75,000, and Apple spends probably closer to 200 to 250,000. That's what you're competing with when you have someone just watching. You know, like so like you're you know, everybody else is watching that all the time, and I think that will continue to be successful. I think us watching, you know, WandaVision or The Bourne Identity or something like that is going to work, but that's really expensive. I think that if you're doing a conference, you have to, the cheapest way to do it is a conversation, because it engages people and it keeps them tied in and makes them feel like they're part of a community without spending $75,000 a finished minute. Jason and Sky, real quick, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, it's extremely important to remember to be respectful of your audience's time, because you just because they are there doesn't mean that you are guaranteed their attention. That attentional blink goes away and like it's gone.
And there's this thing between what you said and what Joe was talking about is that, you want it to be, you don't want to be regimented. You want to give yourself time to breathe to do that, but you also don't want a lot of hiccups. So like, even just the let me show my screen to me is a hiccup, and where I'm going with a lot of the stuff is being able to have, that's why we use Zoom rooms. So I have both the speaker's screen share and the speaker coming in at full resolution to me. So then they just go, okay, let me show you something, and boom, we cut to it, and so you tightening that conversation makes it more engaging. So we're trying to get rid of all of that, all those breaths, in that process. It doesn't mean that we're regimenting time, but it does mean that we're creating a cleaner and tighter show. Go ahead, Sky.
Well, and that $12, $13, $22 investment that you made going into a theatrical performance, you have them contained. They're not going to be twitting and sweeting and swiping and distracted as we can be sitting here in our desk. So that 90-minute constraint is because people bought into that. We're going to go do a thing, invest in and entertain me. But now you're saying entertain me, but I've got so many other distractions, dogs, cats, puppies.
But I think a lot of people enjoy listening. I mean, they'll listen to that conversation, and then maybe they're multitasking. What I will say is that you do have to get to critical mass. So the challenge.
I'm just saying the theatrical, that if you go to a theater.
I know. But what I'm getting back to is the reason that we didn't save the early versions of office hours was I was trying to get to critical mass. I knew that I had to consistently get over 100 people or the conversation wouldn't work. So we couldn't have people just watching later, because if you time shifted it, we now have critical mass. We've got 167 people in Zoom, and on YouTube, we've got another, 30. So, and then we've got a couple more listening. So we're about 200 people, live. And that runs a relatively comfortable conversation. Yesterday, we were closer to 250 live, or 250 to 260, and that started to move really fast. Like the number of questions and the velocity and everything else. And so the thing is that with the kind of conversation that we're having, it's more interesting, in my opinion, when there's more people. But I knew that if everyone started time shifting and we had 20 people here, it wouldn't be the same thing. And so that's why we had to force everybody into a window until we got to a point where we reached critical mass.
Well, and you promoted Frame.io the night before on, so you had a draw there.
Yep. Next question.
Nick Pavlinek, and thank you for the pronunciation, Nick, of Southeast Michigan, says, wondering what the panel thought of the NASA production feed of yesterday's Mars lander.
There was a lot of them. There was the mission control. There was the regular one. There was, the main one. I listen to the mission control because I like listening to comms. So I had mission control open for hours. I just love listening to NASA comms. It's like I could literally listen to NASA comms all day. Roscoe.
On Apollo 13, we were listening for the crackle because that meant they came through successfully. And here we were listening for this thing to land, and then her USB microphone breaks up. And your thought goes through, they spend millions and millions on this project.
Billions.
And then billions, yeah, literally. And then, the USB microphone is kind of the,
The production was not great. And I feel like I think that NASA misses the opportunity there. And I get we can't spend money on that. We're a government agency. We got to spend all the money on the thing. I get that thought process. It's just unfortunate because, what got me into so much of the STEM, what you would now call STEM related ideas as a kid was NASA, like watching, launches and watching. I stayed home for every shuttle launch, it was like an event, and my parents encouraged me to do that. And then off I went, and I was learning science and learning all these other things. And there's this massive opportunity that I don't even think SpaceX does very well either. I mean, I think that they do better than NASA. And so we go, oh, well, they should learn from SpaceX, but they really need to learn from real broadcast. I mean, some of it, I will say that some of the stuff that they showed, the simulations of where the ship is, the simulations of where it is in position, I thought were really good. But then to Roscoe's point, the audio was really bad. A lot of the video setups that they did were really embarrassingly bad. The lighting was bad. Like there were so many things about it that you were just like, why don't, this is, they had 2.5 million people watching. 2.5 million people. Like it's probably worth $500,000 or $1 million to do a great production to engage the next generation of scientists, the next generation of astronauts that are all watching and really creating something that excites them, educates them, inspires them, to move forward. And I just don't think that that's what they did. Courtney and Peter and Chris, real quick.
I'm not sure what I ended up watching. I think it was the JPL feed, but the thing I liked is the thing that they kind of copied from SpaceX, which is the timeline right across the bottom of the frame. Yep. With the progress bar that shows you what's the next event coming up and the distance between the events, so that you get some kind of handle on what's coming up next. And with the 11-minute delay or whatever it is, there's not really much to show other than the simulation. And there was a guy specifically assigned to synchronize the simulation with what was going on at that time. And that helped a lot.
You could have built a much more complex show that shows what the whole mission is going to be like, and tons of behind the scenes of what it took to get it built. You have to think about these for a long time. You look at that Frame.io keynote last week. That was 15 months in the making. They were shooting pieces of it for 15 months. And so, but for NASA, having a behind the scenes crew that's shooting in Super 35 with great images like what we saw with the new Apollo 11. They were doing that back then. Like, I guarantee the amount of money they spent on Apollo 11 footage compared to now is 100x, because they knew that they had to sell the idea. They were trying to, so there was more production value being added to the Apollo missions than there ever is now. Now it's all like barely a thought process compared to Apollo, that they had film cameras shooting at 70 millimeter, for all of that stuff. And that was really hard. And now we have better tools and we're not using them. Peter and then Chris.
Well, that's kind of what I was going to say, is because I'm a generation older than you, Alex, and I remember all the stuff they did for the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo shots. And that was, from what I could tell, a combination of the pool reporters coming in from the pool systems coming in from the news channels.
Right.
CBS, and they would all set up, and they had a pool cameraman sitting inside mission control and inside launch control in Florida. And they don't seem to do any of that anymore.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Let's make a pitch deck.
Yeah.
Why don't we do this? What would you do to win that as a job / contract?
Yeah, we'll think about that. Yeah, because it just it's like when the video is starting, you want to be in the planning meetings. Like the planning meetings and the sketch meetings and the proposals and everything else. And then you'll cut that all into something, 4 years from now when they do the launch. There's all this footage that you're going to use. And and that team should be doing the visualizations and figuring all the stuff out and figuring out what they're planning, so that there's this, 2 or 3 hours of incredible content about what the mission is and how it is, and interviews and process. And then there's some Q&A, and they're jumping in. There's a desk every half hour. There's like this kind of thing where there's people asking questions and there's Q&A and you're answering them and everything else. You could do that for 4 or 5, 6 hours, and the world would stop around that. And then, NASA's not begging for funding, because everybody knows, like that stuff inspires people. And then, that's the whole thing is that if people are inspired by NASA, they'll be like, oh, we should fund that. Right now, no one even knows what they do, and they've that operation out of scarcity and not really paying attention to that, costs the agency billions of dollars. Next question.
Georgie Kennedy, our friend from Washington, D.C. George, miss you on the panel. Says, morning office hours, what's a few options for bonded cell backup? As I sit in the lab streaming, I'm not worried about the machines. They're in the cloud. The worry now is staying connected to them if the FiOS goes down.
Yep, go ahead, Jonas.
The easiest probably is Speedify. It's a VPN that does seamless failovers. I had a stream where we failovered 4 times to YouTube, and it had no stutter at all, which was amazing for me. And you can just tether your phone, multiple Ethernet inputs, multiple phones, and it just works, and it's so cheap.
Mm-hmm. Guy.
Yeah, Speedify is a pretty good recommendation as well. This is a picture from 2012 with 5 bonded modems going into a Sputnik server on AWS. What's that, 8 years ago, 9 years ago? So I had an AT&T, Verizon, Clear. I don't think those guys are even around. So what I'm going to show you here is that in port 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you have different data rates. And so depending on where you're at, and this is especially true in Vegas, is that you can get hit with just low bandwidth depending on who steps in and who starts sucking up all that bandwidth. So you want to be very mindful, not just of who you pick. You want to be very mindful of who you pick. So I would say Sprint, T-Mobile, AT&T, Verizon, all the big players. That would be my main concern, not just bonding multiple of one carrier. So I get what George is doing because I'm doing it myself. And so I have my iPad here, which this thing has, it's its own personal hotspot with a different carrier than my normal one. So if my phone goes out, I still have my Verizon backup. So that's.
And what are you plugging all those modems into?
Back then, that was a bond, a TeraDeck bond. Yeah.
Yeah. And we've used a lot of bonds. So they work pretty well. We use PepWaves a lot as well as kind of a general routing control, so that you can put a bunch of SIMs into them and then they just bond together. Know that you'll probably have trouble with real-time communication like Zoom because of and this gets back into the argument of putting your Zoom event in AWS so that the interactions between folks and the videos and everything else stay in AWS and you're simply controlling it, because that'll probably work. But when you start bonding cellular, you'll end up with a high jitter rate and that'll be problematic for the video. Next question.
Comes to us from Fred Eric Eckert in Bad Herrenau, Germany. Sound devices MixPre 6 versus MixPre 3. Are there more advantages besides just the extra 3 inputs?
Ambisonics. Mickey? Oh, is that what you're going to say? So, that's the big jump between the 3 and the 6 for me is not so much the outputs, inputs, or anything else. It's being able to do ambisonic recording. Go ahead, Chris.
Is it the MS thing?
Go ahead, Mickey.
No, MS is a different version of a different stereo recording technique. For the differences between MixPre 3 and MixPre 6, on top of the additional balanced inputs, the MixPre 3 can only record 3 ISOs, while the MixPre 6 can record 6 ISOs. And that could consist of your 4 balanced inputs and the 2 unbalanced channels you can send in. And on top of that, the MixPre 3 only works as a 6x2 audio interface, while 4x2 audio interface, while the MixPre 6 can be a 6x4 or 8x4. I can't recall. 8x4 interface.
It has 8 USB outputs.
And the additional 2 channels of USB out coming from your computer opens up a good amount of possibilities in terms of routing and flexibility.
You go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I would say if you want to sit down and talk and be in a Zoom meeting, a MixPre 3 is a great tool. But as I started integrating, doing Zoom, but also doing comms and being able to, the outputs I'm so glad I spent the extra money for the 6. It's the outputs, as is the case with most audio consoles, it's more important to buy outputs than inputs. That's my philosophy.
Next question.
Ernest Floyd, who's in Bastrop, Louisiana. I've got a church that wants to completely redo their video and sound. It's all analog right now. It's all a little over my head. Would the group be willing to help me? And could we document the change out for others?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd make that we could probably talk through that as a second hour. I've just, using, we're taking a space, whether it's a church or something else, and taking a space and we're talking about re-rigging it. The thing that you need to give us is some information. So how big the church is, how many people are, that might attend, what the throws are, and then what the budget is. And so, when we work inside of that budget, we can then figure out with what you have, what would be the best solution, because there's a lot of really high-end solutions that we may or may not do. Go ahead. And there's a lot of people here who do AV for churches. So, so I think that we're pretty good space to ask that question. Go ahead, Mickey, and then Jeff.
Yeah, I'm sure the group as a whole would be more than willing to help out, but do check out Marty Atias, who oftentimes joins us in the panel, has started a weekly webinar every, I believe, Thursday evening, and he talks about this specifically. So maybe reach out to him and get the link for the registration.
Yep. Jeff?
Add into your budget acoustic treatment for the room.
Yeah.
Don't forget acoustics.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Brian and Medio Ohio office hours panelists have suggested gray backdrops of 50% and 18%. I found those to be much different. Sherwin-Williams has a neutral gray paint strip with the color, and he gives the RGB values, called Software 7074. Is that close to what you all meant? And he has a link to it.
Go ahead, Jason.
Okay. Oh boy. 18% gray is black at 50% saturation with 18% reflectivity. So if I kick this over here, right in the middle is black at 50% saturation, plus or minus. And if you look at the stops, it means exactly one thing. Sherwin-Williams 7075 is a bluer gray. So it's going to appear darker the bigger you get it. Hopefully that gives you some sense of it. But no, there is no magic. I'm going to go in and get Sherwin-Williams this, and it's going to look that.
And the way we do it is I just take an 18%, and I don't use 18% gray for paint as a. I don't have any reason that it should be 18% or 20% or 15%. I don't really care. The reason I do that when I walk into a paint thing is because I can take an 18% gray card and hand it to them and say, mix me this paint. like this is the color of paint that I want. Match this color, and it's a known gray that I can just hand them from my production. That I know. I just say, just match the paint. You don't have to buy the certain paint can. You just walk into Sherwin-Williams and ask them to mix you a couple gallons that match this card, and it always comes out. So that's why all of my offices, everywhere, I just repaint them all at exactly the same thing. For the last 20 years, they've all been the same. Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah. So in a lot of the studios that I've been at, originally what they would use is something called a Munsell neutral gray N5 paint, which is the paint that they would use in big studios. And it's great. Now it's a little expensive. It's about $115 per gallon. It's a bit much. Luckily, Flanders Scientific got together with Behr Paint, and they came up with their own N5 paint, which is great, which is what I'm using here. And it's about $33 per gallon or $40. You can take the code. It's actually not something you can find on the Behr Paint site. You have to give them a code, and they will look at you funny, because they've done that to me before. And they will make it for you. I will put a link in the chat. It's from FSI. And if you just take the code and just give it to the guy or girl, and they'll make it for you. It's actually fantastic paint, and it gets really, really close to that $110 gallon that. It's a bit much.
That's the answer. Okay, move on. Next question. Like there's, we just nailed it. All right, next question.
Okay, I was just going to mention
next
one.
question. Next question. We got to move. We're running out of time. Okay.
Scott Halver in Chicago. Similar to George's question, beyond having bonded cellular for a stream, RTMP, and so forth, does anyone have a solution to recommend it for a bonded internet connection, Speedify or Peplink, and so forth?
Go ahead, Jonas.
I mean, I use Speedify for almost anything because I can't afford the Peplink. And a cool thing is you can use a Raspberry Pi and link multiple uplinks there and output it via the Ethernet or the USB-C.
Next question.
Sean in Boston, Mass. says, can someone quickly explain for a total noob how you're monitoring, visualizing audio, and doing the mic checks in this Zoom?
We'll just do it really quickly because we're running a little low on time. But that is the WLM meters that you can, and then you're running that through. Mickey, are you running that through Audio Hijack?
Yeah, so I'm just using Audio Hijack to grab the audio from Zoom. No processing involved, and everything is just being fed directly into it.
Next question.
Andy looks like Kokendorfer in Melbourne, Australia. How to get Zoom presenters to follow best practices for lighting, headset, mic, and so forth. We constantly struggle with C-levels that look and sound terrible and do not take the steps for video audio quality improvement. That's corporate suite, folks. Internal corporate AV system in here, so I cannot turn down presenters. Any suggestions? Thanks.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Have they ever heard of the book Dress for Success? You now need videos for success.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. If you want people, especially if you're a C-level, what's funny is that a lot of companies now are spending a lot of money on their cameras. So they can either be in the front of this curve or the end of this curve. But the race because what happens is that if you want to have authority when you're talking to all of your employees, to your partners, to everything else, you need to look and sound good. And if you're not, it's like showing up with t-shirts, cutoffs, and flip-flops. And if you think people are actually going to listen to you that way, then you're sorely mistaken. They'll listen, but it's not the same. I mean, you have to put some effort into it, like you would. What we talk about a lot is like you would if you were showing up for a meeting, you would dress for success, to what Roscoe said. And this is just the new version of that. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, similar to that for call for proposers for conferences starting this year, we started recommending to clients that they actually have every potential presenter do a 5-minute demo video as part of their proposal. And that would probably work with these people as well. Once they have to face just how bad they look and sound, it's a little hard to deny your recommendation.
A lot of times, my standard way of doing everything is to find the people who are excited about it and make them look great, and then use their success and beat everybody else with it. So you find the 3 C-level folks that'll play hard with them, make sure that they've got the best cameras and everything else. Everyone else will follow because in every meeting, those folks will look so much better than everyone else that the other ones will they won't be able to take it forever. They'll eventually tighten their solution. Next question. We're running out of time.
David Brady in New York. I picked up a Pyle HM2 and have a Pyle PMX U43BT mixer. Connecting the mic to the mixer via TRS gets 0 signal. Would a mic preamp correct this? Any recommendations? And he says he's not quite ready for a MixPre level up.
So that's the mixer.
I imagine he's just missing the 2.5 volts mic power that those mics need, which you're not going to get out of that mixer. Don't turn on phantom power.
Yeah, the phantom power it'll make the mic get really hot really fast, and then it won't work at all. And I've done it. Go ahead, Mickey.
And yeah, I'm not, depending on what the sort of adapter you're using, you may be feeding an unbalanced signal directly to both poles of a balanced input, which would essentially cancel the signal out.
Next question.
James Fosseline of Bloomington says, having issues getting Playoutbee to be seen by ATEM as a hyperdeck. I didn't understand the step of removing a number and entering it again. Can we go over that again?
Go ahead, Jonas. Oh, we can't hear you. There you go.
So in the controls where you enter the IP address, you just remove the last number. For example, if it's a 6, remove the 6 and put a 5, and then press connect, and then it will fail. Of course, it's the wrong address. And then you can type in the correct address again and try again, and that way it should work. It's a weird UX bug in the ATEM software.
It's great when people ask questions and the developer is in the panel. All right, next question.
James Fosseline is back and says, anyone use Blackmagic Video Assist to input XLR audio or use it in a workflow to record?
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Sure, absolutely. Quite a bit, in fact, and they work beautifully. Just be dead certain that you're using exactly the right card.
Roscoe.
Yeah, same thing. We use it all the time as the destination for record. And the nice thing about the XLRs is you can take a mix out of a board and everything works great.
Next question.
Sean in Boston, Massachusetts said, any suggestions for portable video streaming lights, less than $100 US per light? Love the community, learned so much from everyone.
So we use the Luma. I don't know how much the LumaPad 25s are. I don't order them, but we use a lot of those for the lights that we're doing. The other one that I got from Chris Comfort, I got the idea from Chris Comfort, is these, and for some reason it's not charged. This one didn't charge up, but these little nanlite pano or pavo tubes, which is, I have one right here. and we're kind of going for those as portable, inexpensive, can throw them up there, and they're working pretty well as a test. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Two lights that we talk about all the time. One from Newer, Neewer. They make panel lights from little camera lights all the way up to fabric lights and big lights. And some of them they'll cross over the $100 point in some of those lights, but a lot of them will be under 100 for singles. And then Fossetan is another one that you might find on Amazon. That they're pretty much the same lights, except they just have their brand names on them.
And they come with they come with stands too.
What I'm interested about this is you can do all kinds of colors with it that I didn't expect. So you can it's 32 to 56, and then colors, and then effects, and then everything else, and it's a tight little thing that I can put in my suitcase or my backpack. So I'm trying to always get down to a travel kit that I can fit in my backpack. That's a small obsession of mine. Next question.
Jason Robertshire of Sarasota, Florida says, picked up one of the TechRise USB audio adapters. Does this work with the Apple mic earbuds? Am I holding it wrong? Also ordering a Polson, but curious if it is supposed to work with Apple earbuds. Note Apple does non-standard things with TRS, as I recall.
Yeah, go ahead, Roscoe.
Well, the Apple, no, because you're using 3 connections and they're dedicated microphone and ear, and the Apple is designed for a single connection to do all of that. So it's going to possibly short out. And the other thing I found out the other day is the new ones are not wired the same as the old ones. The TechRises have slightly changed their wiring, but they work. If you just pull your microphone feed just out 1 notch, then it'll work fine.
Yep. Go ahead, Courtney, real quick.
I don't know if this is the same as the TechRise, but I got one of these, which looks exactly like the TechRise, and I took it apart, and all 3 inputs, the center input there is for headset and microphone combo, so it would have both. It should, but I'm not sure if the wiring and the TRRS, and all 3 inputs have TRRS actual connectors on them, but they're hooked up differently. So, and I'm not sure how Apple wires their TRRS headsets on their wired headsets for the earbuds.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, I had that one, and it does not work like the TechRises work. So I would go with the brand name TechRise.
Next question.
Ray Franco of Mount Dora, Florida says, with all my audio sources going through my mixer, what are the circumstances where I need to connect the mixer USB to my computer? Thanks.
Go ahead, Jeff. And then Mickey, and then we'll move on.
Where you want your computer to get the audio from your mixer. We really don't have enough information about what you're trying to do and what devices you have.
Go ahead, Mickey.
And just to add on to that, if you need to feed audio from your computer to the mixer the other way around, then you'd want to hook that up. Like, say, if you want to do like music playout, or maybe get the audio from Zoom so you can monitor it, then you'd want to utilize the USB connection.
Next question.
Andy Dolph, Durham, New Hampshire, thinking about Unity comms. Is it worth a Studio Tech box or similar as an interface for the headset? Blue Parrots over Bluetooth or something else?
You don't need the Studio Tech just to tie into Unity comms. You do that if you have a local crew that needs to talk to each other in low latency, high quality, and then you're going to tie that into Unity. So you'll have a Studio Tech boxes. These are like the 4-channel. I would recommend the 4-channel. Don't get the 2-channel. I mean, you can get the 2-channel for the camera operators or something, but you're just going to want 4 channels. So, so you get the 4-channel ones, and then your entire crew talks to each other that way, 5, 6, and then you have to start. Once you go past 5 or 6 people, you have to get a real router to pull that together. But then you use Unity to tie in with people that aren't necessarily in the room, and at least that's how we're using it. That you can do all Dante without. You don't need Unity to do the comms. You could do it all over Dante, but you start needing to have more robust systems. I have one question for Doug around that. Doug, how quickly can you make changes in that Symmetrics?
Pretty quick. Yeah. I mean, it's just a matter of just rerouting things.
And is it handling does it handle the mix minus pretty quickly as you do that? Is it kind of automatic, or is it something you have to kind of think through for each connection?
No, I mean, it's a standard matrix of mix minus. You just go down the list and make sure they're all set. But it's you pull the config, you make your changes and push the config, and you're done. Yeah. And you can save different configs too. So you can have a sports show for one and a Zoom show for another, and a theater show for another one. So
yeah. Next question.
Alton Christensen in Brooklyn's back with a question regarding the Blackmagic Design Micro Studio 4K. Do any Blackmagic apps, desktop and iOS or third-party Bluetooth Plus, allow access to camera settings like turning on phantom power or switching mic line audio in or formatting SD cards via wired or wireless connection?
Go ahead, Jason.
That's a great question, and it's a great gotcha. I love, and I'm using right now, the Micro Studio 4K. The Bluetooth app does not work with it. There is no card in the Micro Studio 4K. Again, there is no card at all.
In the 4K, but not in the with 1080 there is a card, but in the 4K there's not a card.
Yeah, he said the 4K.
Okay,
so
yeah.
It is absolutely it is designed for a switcher. It is controlled with a switcher. And the only way to modify it is, you got to get the HDMI out, and then there are teeny tiny little buttons right there to mess with.
And it's, it's a last generation for them. They haven't updated those for 5 or 6 years. So I think that we'll expect more in the future. Next question.
Tommy Shantz in St. Paul, Minnesota says, I have a bevy of AJA HA5s that only output 720p and was having issues getting into the ATEM Mini Pro. It doesn't give me a 720p option in the drop down, but the manual says it should work. Any suggestions?
It should be able to see them. It should be able to see a 720, even though it doesn't really operate there. I don't have an answer. Go ahead, Guy.
I wonder if he's plugging them into input 1 for testing. He needs to go to 2, 3, or 4 because 1's not doing the scaling. I don't think. I think that he might have it just in that pass-through mode for gamers. So try
every time someone says I'm having trouble with my ATEM Mini with an input, I go just go to input 2, and they're like, "How did you know?" Office hours, we all just notice. Skip. I skip 1 until I have to use it because of it's a special input. Next question.
Rick Danby in Rugby UK says, when running Zoom OSC and AWS as an NDI source for vMix, boy, there's a bunch of initial salad. What size instance do you use? But we understand it all.
Yep. Go ahead, Guy.
I didn't even raise my hand. G4DN X large 2X large is the one that we use. For Zoom, actually, you could probably get away without the 2X. You can go with a 1X, but it's a G4DN. We use the ones with the GPU from NVIDIA, not the ones with the AD, which are the Radeon ones. Although some people have had success with those, but check the numbers for your data center where you're at, because one's like 70 cents. So there's like Ohio, there's Portland. We were looking at these numbers yesterday because we're on the same boat trying to find the least expensive one that will pass NDI back over to another one. So G4DN X large would be the one that
that's why I didn't wait for Guy to raise his hand. All right, next question.
Laura Seal in Greensboro, North Carolina. Multi-view monitors with 4 HDMI loop throughs. Should I look at FieldWorld or any other vendors?
Go ahead, John, and then Jason, and then we'll move on.
I got the FieldWorld. It's the ATEM name in it. I think ATEM 156, and it's got 4 HDMI in and out. The monitor's a little slow in switching. Got it from Guy. Works perfectly.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
FieldWorld is certainly the cheapest way to go. They certainly do work. I can't speak to their dexterity. I haven't used them extensively in the field. All of my multi-views, like for stuff like that, are rack mounted and much heavier and much more expensive, but it'll do the job, especially during COVID.
I did recently get a monoprice quad. It's not a part of the monitor. It's just a separate one. It doesn't do loop through. It just goes in, and then you can switch between 4-up and singles and so on and so forth for about $250, and it works pretty well. And what's the higher end monitor? There's another monitor that's like $1,200 that does loop throughs, but I can't remember what the name of it is.
From Monoprice?
Not Monoprice. It's something else. Someone else mentioned it, and I looked at buying it. I haven't bought it yet. Next question.
Comes from Richard Lavery from Belfast. Sorry about that. Recommendations for audio delay into larger ATEM switchers. ATEM switchers. I'm sorry. You're right. We currently delay from the mixer, but was looking for other options as well. Thank you.
The older switchers don't do it yet, or ever will ever do it. They don't have the processing. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, the right way to do this is you embed using Teranex embedders, rack-mounted embedders, and you do it in line with the camera. That's one of the reasons that despite all of this equipment that I have, my delay is always spot on because it's in line. It's SDI. It cannot be out.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I would recommend that we stick with using the audio equipment to do the audio processing, such as the delay. So how you have it now, where you are adding the delay in the mixer, is how I would do it.
That's why I didn't know how it worked with Jeff Francis, is because we just never do that. We just always have our mixers doing it. Next question.
Tony Tang in Chicago, Illinois says, Jonas, will the file formats, will Playoutbee support fill key video output? Does it require a separate file for fill and key videos to run in parallel, or will you support a codec like ProRes 444 with alpha channel embedded?
ProRes is not something I can play in the browser, but RabM, it's a codec that can be used in MP4, has an alpha channel, and I can probably generate key fill from that, but that's still in the research and development phase.
Next question.
And the last one for the pre-show grouping, Julius Elkin in Birmingham, UK. Would the panel recommend any MAM, Media Asset Manager, or DAM, Digital Asset Managing System, that integrates with Amazon AWS S3 as storage, looking to manage our S3 footage archive?
I haven't used anything inexpensive. So the ones that I use are really have been painfully expensive, easy to use, but painfully expensive. So go ahead, Jason.
The cheapest that I'm aware of is Wasabi, and you pay per terabyte, and you better have some great bandwidth. But like dollar for dollar, it's very inexpensive.
Now we're going to shift to to our next subject, talking about doing site surveys, otherwise known in many parts of the world as recce's, reconnaissance. Michael Sharon, raise your hand if you want to pop in. Michael and I have worked together in the past, and if he's open to it, we'll bring him in and do a quick mic check here. Go ahead and bring Michael in, and Michael will have you.
Hi there.
Hey, do you have a camera? Oh, there we go.
Coming on.
Look at that. That's great. And Michael, I saw you sent me that thing. I couldn't get into Dropbox yesterday. I was having trouble logging into it with my thing, so I haven't seen it yet. But so and Michael and I have worked on a few jobs together, and so he really knows this process. This is definitely part of what he does. Michael, do you want to talk a little bit at a high level about what you do? So what we're talking about really is, you have a show, you're going to do it at a specific location. When you get there, and all of us have different things we do. So we'll start with Michael, and then other people and the panelists let us know what you do. But what do you need to know? What are you looking for when you get to the venue, whether that's someone's office or a theater or a outdoor location? Go ahead, Michael.
Thank you. So really, I tend to work on larger corporate shows. So a lot of times I'm in hotel ballrooms and convention centers and stuff like that. But pretty much the information you're looking for is going to be similar, venue to venue. And it's really how to integrate what you're bringing into the space that you're moving into. And I literally do it from, walking up to the building, You're walking up, it's like, okay, how do you get to the building? Do they have a loading dock? How do you get into this space? How do you physically load in? And literally, you just take your steps all the way through as if you were doing a show. And as you enter in the room, you think, oh, what's the rigging like? Can we actually rig in this space? Where can we put things? Where can we store things? Where do we get power? Where do we get water? Where do we get, all the other things that you might need particular to your show? And document with as many photos, as much information as you can possibly get, because invariably there's going to be something that you forget about. Oh yeah, we're loading into this space and nobody told you that there are 3 steps to get into the room. And so do you bring a ramp? Do you have all the other things? So you really have to be really thorough and document everything. And, that way you're not coming back later and saying, it's like, oh yeah, how big is the elevator? And can we actually fit, a 10-foot jib or whatever into it? Or, are there limitations on the floor of how much physical weight we can put on it? And certainly one of the things you really want to be most attentive to is knowing that when you're going into a space, generally you're going to be there for, a day for a shoot or maybe a week for a convention or something like that. But the people that run the place are there permanently. And so anytime, you do accidentally do something like, somebody drops something and, you tear off some wallpaper or you break a tile on the floor, yes, it's horrible and you feel bad about it, but for the people that work in the building, it may take them weeks to replace that one tile. And for all the next people that are going to be coming into the space, they're all going to say, hey, why is that tile broken and stuff? So you really have to be cognizant about being super attentive to the facility, recognizing when people say, oh, you can't do that, maybe they have a reason for that. Or, if we're going in there and saying, oh yeah, do I need to put, RAM board down everywhere that I'm going to have a cart rolling through? Do I need to, can I put tape on the floor? Or is it a polished wood floor that you have to put down blue tape before you put any other tape down? So, asking all the questions beforehand make it so that when you actually get there and you're on a tight time frame, you're not held up because, oh yeah, we forgot we got to put, Marley down on the floor before we can actually load in any cards. So it's really going in and just, asking all the questions and having a big thorough checklist so that how you can get into the space, how you can work in the space, what you're allowed to do, what you can't do, and then also be able to get out, as quickly and as easily as possible.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things is just asking the questions changes your relationship with the venue as well. So when they realize that you're paying attention to those little details, they relax a little bit. They know that you're going to take care of the space, and that gets you a lot of things. That gets you a lot of understanding later. As in a lot of more, everything. I think a lot of times people forget that everything is very subjective. Like how you treat your flight attendants will greatly affect all kinds of things. How you treat people that your wait staff will change things about what your meal looks like and whether you get extras and everything else. Same thing with the venue. I know that when we walked in, we had a walk through in the White House, and we asked, the first question that we came out of the gate with was, we think that we will need 50 to 60 carpet squares, because we're in the East Room. Is that something you're going to supply, or should we bring those in? And they're like, oh, no, we'll bring those in. We've got those, but it set the pace for the conversation, that we're paying attention to where all of our stuff is. We're paying attention to all those pieces. And then they just know that you're paying attention to little details. I think for me, because I'm doing events with the internet, of course, I want to know everything about the internet, so I want to know, where am I getting my internet? Is there two locations? Am I getting internet from two different providers? And I want to know how diverse that path is. So I want to know that I have, if they're going to give me two internet, do those two internet connections end up in a single router somewhere in the building? Which is very common. So that doesn't help me. It doesn't help me if you do that. So I want, from the time it hits the building, I want it in two different connections. And then I want two diverse routes, and preferably geographically diverse, meaning they're going in and out they're coming into the room and they're splitting around and coming to me, so that if a forklift runs over one, I still have internet, and so those are the kind of things that I'm thinking about when I'm loading in is those. And then a lot of the stuff that Michael already talked about, mounting pins or mounting points, and where they are, and where the power is coming in, and how much power am I going to get? And are they giving me, are they going to break that power down to 120s if I need it? Or is that something that I need to do? And then what are the labor rules? Is this a union facility or non-union facility? What can I touch? What can't I touch? Are things that you want to know ahead of time. And by the way, if you have questions about all of this, it's the question. There's not a lot of questions, so we're just going to keep chit-chatting until you ask them. But so what are the rules of engagement in that area? What are the scheduling? Is there a scheduling process for the dock? So on a big event, we're going to have, I have to have a schedule, and I have to hit that schedule because there's 20 trucks coming in to that dock, and I'm going to jack everything up. And the question is also, how high is the dock? So do I have to come in at a standard height, or, or is generally it's a standard height, but if I have a smaller truck, I need to know if I can bring that in, or should I get a truck much bigger than what I need to make sure that I'm flush with the dock. And then, to Michael's point again, what is the load in? How far do I have to go to do it? For instance, loading into the Win, I think it's the Win. It's like a mile. I don't know if it's a mile, but it's close to it. But it changes, like when we load into that specific into the Win, we change the kind of gear how our gear is configured changes, because I don't want to make a bunch of trips, because I want bigger cases that come out of bigger trucks, because I'm going to have to do that over a very long period of time. I lost one of my lights. Anyway, so those are things that we think about, a lot as we start to go through that. Go ahead, Michael.
As in me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Michael.
Okay. One of the huge things, I don't know how many of you guys have ever dealt with this, is rigging. A lot of facilities demand that you provide a rigging plot 6 months in advance so that they have time to go over it and make sure that the load tables and all that kind of stuff are within what their building can handle, and that you're going to be rigging at a 10-to-1 ratio or a 7-to-1 ratio, whatever ratio they're demanding. Failing to meet that can cost an exuberant amount of money, number one. The other issue, as a well-seasoned production manager, and I do this a lot, site surveying, I've got a checklist. I've got a list that I've built over the years that I methodically go through and answer every question, because I'm human. I'm not infallible. I will forget things. I'll forget to look at something or ask a question. So that checklist really, really helps.
Well, and also for whatever you're doing, a lot of times I don't get to do the walkthrough. I mean, like I'll be loading into another country. And so I need to send a checklist out to somebody else I need you to fill this out for me. I need to know everything about this location. And these are the things that I need. And a lot of times we'll have meetings about what that checklist is for that location. So you're going to talk to folks, you're going to be in a conversation with them. And then we're going to build out this big, checklist of make sure that we understand what this looks like. Also, I like to be in the facility on the time of day of my event. If it's a 2-hour event, I want to know what it looks like at that time, because a lot of times things look very different or respond very differently based on what time it is, and you see a bunch of things and you make assumptions, and then you don't realize that, oh, right, that skylight, it is really a skylight. It's not like a decoration. So you want to know those things, as you go through it. Go ahead, Bill, and then Joe, and then Mickey.
Well, I just wanted to expand it, because we've been talking mostly about indoor ballroom kind of fixed facility kind of things, which is, this is all critically important, because I spent most of my shooting career in Arizona. We did a lot of stuff outdoors, except in the heart of summer. So there's a different set of things that I had to pay attention to if I'm reconnoitering a outdoor location. Particularly, there's some tools that I found were really helpful. There's an iPad app called Compass Commander, or Commander Compass, and I always take that out. And the first thing I want to do is figure out, okay, what direction am I going to be shooting? If I get an idea of a location, what way does it face? Where's the sun coming up? Where's the sun going down? I also want to pay attention to what's around that outdoor location in terms of traffic. If I have a shoot during drive time and I'm near something relatively busy where I think trucks are going to be, your sound profile will change remarkably from the time you might be shooting. And if you push it back an hour, it might change totally. Parking and things like that. And where's the crew going to park? If I'm in an office building or something like that, will the parking lot be full? And we get into the same thing Alex was talking about with long schleps for equipment rather than close-ups if we can't control it. And is there so much traffic that we may need police involvement to control streets and things like that? That's all part of the location scout that I'm doing ahead of time. And for those facilities, am I going to need insurance certificates that are extra because of the fact that I'm going to be impeding the public outdoors? And then things like getting an idea through your local wind and weather forecasting things are they expecting a windy day or not? We don't have as much problem. We didn't in Arizona as some places, but boy, if you're shooting outside and you need reflectors, wind is a huge time waster if you get into a situation you're not prepared for it.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, we're talking a lot about the technical stuff, but on the production side of things, if just to add on to what Bill was mentioning about shooting outdoors, keep in mind that a lot of places where you might want to shoot would require permits, and sometimes actually multiple permits, like permits not only from the actual establishment or building where you're holding your production, but also say like if it's in a business park, for example, you might also need an additional permit from the business park, and also on top of that a city permit for the shoot. So look at every layer of permission you might need to get.
And parking
I'm going to double on that.
Like the big thing we get into is we're putting in SAT trucks, and we need to know when can we move them in, and can we get them coned off, and can we just take over the space? A lot of times getting ahead of things is knowing, hey, I want to have this whole block blocked off. What does it cost me to basically eliminate that as an option? But let's go ahead and jump into some questions.
Okay, fair enough. The first one comes from Keenan Campbell at Princeton, Illinois. Do you have a sample pre-flight checklist for locations and events? And if so, can you share on Discord?
Yeah, I can. And Michael, is it okay to share the one that you have there? Yep. So we'll get that one up on Discord. We'll put up that checklist and make that one. That's a good start. It'd be fun for us to kind of probably collaborate on it. Start with what Michael has there and add our internet questions and our other questions and other things that we might want. I know that there's been some effects firms that when they do those, they have like a 10-page manual on how to do a site survey to make sure that no one forgets that. Now, I will admit, a lot of my site surveys now, this will sound a little overkill, but if it's a big event, my site surveys include LiDAR at this point. So I will rent a LiDAR system, and I'll walk in, and while I'm talking to the client, I'm taking a 3D scan of the space. It's just so much simpler. Like it saves me so much time for measurement. If they have the CAD drawings, then I just use the CAD drawings. Those are generally pretty accurate. But having a LiDAR representation of the space later lets us go, well, how far is it from that door? And what's the cable run? Or what's the other bit? You can just figure it out, really quickly. Go ahead, Joe, and then Jason, and then Bill.
Yeah, I was just going to add, your checklist should probably include time of year. Sometimes people kick the tires 6 months out. And if you're dealing with the lighting issues that Bill and Alex were talking about, natural light, 6 p.m. in Florida on January is very different than 6 p.m. in, say, June.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, a quick comment about the CAD drawings. I mean, the very, very first thing that I ask for is, either the CAD drawings or the blueprints. And the important thing here is, your modern iPhone has a LiDAR, and all you need are 1 or 2 measurements, and that will allow you to force the scale and correct the CAD drawing if it's incorrect.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I just want to add to what Mickey said. We have run into all sorts of jurisdictional issues too, where if we're shooting in Sedona or something like that, not only do I need the town permission and not only do I need the state permission, but the land might be Bureau of Land Management. So you might have to go through 3 or 4 different permitting authorities to get everything straightened up.
Yep. Next question.
Moving to Nick Gutfriend of Bedford, New York. And Nick says, I do corporate and nonprofit work. My first 2 concerns after relationship building are noise and power. Anything else?
Yeah, everything else. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Well, yeah, I mean, and it depends if you're indoors or outdoors tremendously. But, light sources that you can't control or that take a lot of, to cover a window, that kind of stuff. I mean, yeah, just doors that are slamming inside a building, or not slamming, but just making noise it seems far away. And suddenly buildings right now, my college, it's very quiet. It's a wonderful filming location, but you bring 35,000 students near the campus and it totally changes.
I had a shoot in Palo Alto at a really nice house, like an $8 million house, which isn't very big in Palo Alto. It's kind of like a medium-sized house in it's cute little bungalow in Indiana. Anyway, we were shooting. I had to go there, and I just didn't think through the fact that I was walking in. We were in a rush, and I was walking in on Labor Day to do the walkthrough, and it was at a certain time. And what I didn't register was that there was construction that just didn't look like it had been abandoned, like because everyone had not been allowed to work for months, so it all looked overgrown and not really whatever. What I didn't know was first day after Labor Day is when they went back to work. So they hadn't worked on it for 2 months, and the first day after Labor Day, and there was a number there that I could have called that I should have. And it turned out okay. We were but we had to think about it all the time. And there were a handful of times where we just had to stop recording so that we could, let whatever was backing up, finish backing up, but there was this kind of constant drone of hammers and other things and everything else, but I just went on the wrong day. So it is something that's important to be clear of. You got to be paranoid about everything. And for larger events, you get good at paying people. We didn't have to do it with the construction across the street, but we're pretty like, hey, can I pay you $500 not to be here? like for tomorrow, like, or not make any noise. I'll throw you a check. All you got to do is just sit home and watch TV really low. And then, and it's cheaper than trying to figure out another space. Go ahead, Chris, and then Courtney.
Alex, I know you're kind of anti-cash, but sometimes throwing a couple $100 at somebody quickly right away can make a difference. Also, in terms of like load in stuff, I always want to walk the load in. I recently did a show where we had and walked the whole thing. And so we did a show where we didn't do that. And although we were only coming through the side door of the ground floor of the building, because it was in the city with a slight grade on the road, there was an elevator that went up 4 steps. It literally, you went in here, it went up less than a floor, and then you went out the other side of the elevator. And that elevator, because it became the pinch point for the whole load in.
We had one where whoever was going through it looked down the hallway, and from their perspective, it looked like it went straight out to the load in to the street, and there was a 4-inch gap. 4 inches that you would only see if you're on the other side. And because they didn't walk through the whole thing, oh my God! When you're bringing in kit like cases on rollers that are 800 pounds, it is not 4 inches is a long is a
4 inches
really
can
high
wreck a
gap.
whole lot of money.
We got through it, but it was like there was 4 people there that just stood there and helped every case had 4 people just sitting there getting over that hump. It was a huge draw. Go ahead, Bill.
I just very quickly as to Chris's thing, I've done the same thing. Sometimes some bills in the pocket do it, but be careful, particularly in corporate. We did a thing once where we said, how many corporate brands can you name for the company? We'll give you $20 each time. I got called on the carpet big time after that because it was compensation. We hadn't taken out taxes, figured out FICA and the rest of that. Corporations do not like you giving their people money in the course of their jobs. So just be careful.
In Rwanda,
the construction workers, it's a little different. It's
yeah,
like, hey, dude,
you're
go
totally
take
right.
a long lunch
like,
for an hour.
As an example, in Rwanda, you can be deported. Like to be clear, it's like they're so anti-corruption that you hand somebody cash without an agreement as a foreigner, and you may be on the next flight out. Like that's how rough it is in that country. Next question.
Okay, moving to Roscoe Jones. Roscoe says, what's the method you use to document and report on your findings?
PDF. A PDF that we usually build in Keynote. So for us, I build a whole thing with pictures and diagrams and process and things and where it's all going to go through, and pictures of like, this is the place that we're going to load in from. This is where we're going to go, maps of all those bits and pieces. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, it's the same thing. I'll go in and photograph everything. And if you've got a 360 camera, that helps a whole lot. But then one of the things I'll also do is on all of the photos themselves, I'll superimpose a little map so that you can see where the photo was taken. so that you know that, oh yeah, this is where I'm standing in the hallway looking down around this corner and stuff like that. And then getting back to the CAD files and stuff like that, everything is worth verifying. For the first 7 or 8 years, Moscone Convention Center, they were giving out CAD files that were not as built. They were design files. And some walls were literally 1.5 feet off, which is not that big of a deal if you're just loading in a show, but if you're trying to fit in a trade show booth that needs to have a fire exit, suddenly, and the Gaylord Gaylord Hotel in Denver was giving out CAD files, and all of the rig points were 15 feet off. So we literally were halfway through load in, and we realized we needed to move the entire lighting rig 15 feet over, which cost us about 6 hours.
And the thing that has been really successful that we've just started to really push down in the last couple of years is this idea of visualizing it. So scanning it and then building it in SketchUp or a variety of other things with texture maps, and building so you have a very, very accurate picture of your room. And then it's also got it's easy to work with. The problem with LiDAR is in its raw state, it's almost impossible to work with. So you need to rebuild, you have somebody build that back up inside of SketchUp or inside of a CAD program. And then what happens is that we're now having, in some cases, well, this is before COVID, we were moving towards basically using VR so that you can bring that in and basically have the client look at, this is what you can jump to any part of the space with the stage, lighting, everything all built out. You can jump and just look at it. And that fixes a bunch of more problems than you would think. This is on the high end of events, but it fixes it. I had a show in Moscone where the CMO walked up on stage and said, this stage isn't going deep enough. We need to extend the stage. This is the night before the event or 2 nights before the event. I need to extend the stage 15 feet. Change all the lighting and everything else. And they went back and they came back half an hour later and said, that'll be $400,000. And he went, okay. and the entire, like Local 16 just kind of breathed out, like all these people showed up, and it was an overnight flip that could have been fixed with a VR, that could have been fixed with a visualization. When you're looking at all the drawings, the executives don't know what they're looking at. And so by creating something that looks very, very realistic for them, if it's totally accurate, it can let them make decisions in a way that they can't make if they're just looking at the drawings that make sense to Michael and I, but won't necessarily make sense to someone who doesn't look at them every day. Go ahead, Michael Fraley.
This is where, for me, Vectorworks is a lifesaver. I use Vectorworks on almost every show, even smaller stuff, because I can take that rendering and give it to my crew, and they know exactly where everything's going to go. They know what the end result is supposed to look like. They now know what the goal is, and it helps with clients so much too, because you get so many clients that they can't visualize it themselves. So if you can present it to them, hey, this is what it's going to look like. What do you think? Man, it saves so much time.
And for us, especially in smaller spaces, we have just a little bit of space to put cameras and everything else. Will that camera with that lens actually, what is my frame going to be? And what is, where are those lights actually going to be? And will they be big, will they be in frame? Will they be out of frame? So if we're building into a conference room, for instance, for us, even those kinds of things, having very accurate information really helps a lot. Next question.
Moving on, Courtney Gooden has one here from the panel in Hollywood. Do you ever use any of the site's AV infrastructure, that is tie lines between the back of the house or booths and stage and so forth? Or do you always plan on using your own signal distribution?
Go ahead, Michael.
Always use your own. Oh, man, you have no idea whether they've maintained that stuff or not. And I got to tell you, at least 75% of the time I've been bit in the butt with the house's AV stuff. Number one. Number two, man, especially if it's, okay, I'm not going to mention any companies' names, but there's a certain company out there, they're going to charge you just out the yin yang for using anything of theirs. So yeah, I always use your own.
I wonder if that company rhymes with PSAV. Jason.
Rarely do I get to use superlatives during office hours. Never never deal with in-house distribution. Like
Sometimes-
distribution
no.
is the
So-
most important thing.
There are things that you can't, oftentimes you can't avoid. So it would be, there's, so you can't never use it with power. Oftentimes
Right,
internet
floor
runs,
pockets.
power, internet runs, fiber. Those are things that you hope that you're working in. The one thing that I will say is that what I'm always amazed by is how many, and this gets back into being in the conversation early, is that we'll have clients that'll pick a facility that looks pretty and has no technical capacity, and then they don't understand why the job costs $100,000 more than they thought it would, because we had to bring in generators and we had to bring in, internet, and there was no internet at the space. I mean, this is a very common thing to have happen. I think we're going to see less of that. One of the things for facilities is if they're not beefing up their internet now, they're not going to survive. Like they have to have, a gig in and out of every facility. Any facility that wants to be treated, is, a redundant gigabit connection to a large facility or anyone in the state, because everything's going to be virtualized to some degree. It's not, I think we are going to go back to physical events, but I don't think that I think they're going to require connections in a way that didn't happen before. Go ahead, Roscoe and Courtney.
Don't trust anyone from the hotel crew or the venue crew, anyone. In 2001, I had the CEO of Akamai doing a presentation. This is in the early days, and at Macworld. And we were using the Marriott hotel room, and people wanted a little more lighting for their notes. And the guy totally took out the lighting system in the entire room. Thankfully, I brought some lights. So literally the whole thing was done in the dark but thankfully we had some lights I'd brought just to light up the person a little bit as they were presenting. And that became the sole light source for an entire.
Yep. Courtney.
Well, one thing to consider, and I understand the necessity of running your own if you can, but a lot of venues have fire laws that prevent you from cabling across entryways, et cetera, and there's just no pathway between the stage and the booth or whatever other than the pre-run line. So during your site survey, if you're forced to use their interconnects, take a signal generator and a monitor for whatever signals you're going to be sending, whether it's Ethernet or digital audio, digital video, analog audio, and check it between the 2 points. And also look for, racks of equipment that are locked behind doors that people don't have keys to, patch panels, etc. Because you can run into that. You can do the site survey and everything's working great. We won't have to bring any cable. We'll just use your internal cabling. And then you get there the night of the venue, and it's like, well, there's a patch panel that was patched in when you did the site survey, and that's locked up, and that guy's at home. So, sorry.
Go ahead,
Mickey, and that kind of stuff.
Mickey, and then Chris.
And yeah, just to add to that, like if you are forced to use the patch panels at the location, bear in mind that sometimes these, especially audio and video connections, could somehow be tied into an automation system at the venue. So they could work during the recce, but on your actual event day, it might be disabled.
Yeah. Points of contact. One thing that you want to get before your show, like who's managing the internet, who's the power, who's the union, who's the, you need to make sure that you get those, and you want to get them early. You want to know who the point of, who is the, direct responsible individual that you're going to deal with. Go ahead, Chris.
I would agree. Don't use internal infrastructure, but also be savvy and flexible. I can't remember the exact instance of why it happened, but I think I had to move a table from point A to point B across the doorway, like what Courtney was saying. And we ended up patching a line through their patch bay, which was, 100 yards away. And I'd used, point 16 and point 17, and then I looped them together with a barrel, at the patch bay to avoid having to, because it was like a last minute thing, to avoid having to run a kill. And we tested it and it was clean. Be savvy and flexible. It could save you on occasion.
Yeah, good, Bill.
To Alex's point, increasingly in the modern buildings that I've been working in, they have a centralized energy management system. So you can't even turn off an air conditioning if you need to without going through their central offices. And often buildings nowadays are pumping in white noise. Same thing. You can't defeat it unless you can get to the EMS controllers ahead of time. Sometimes takes a week.
Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
And just thinking of, running stuff out your doors. One of the things to always be aware of is security. And, if you're running cables out to a satellite truck or feeder cable in from a generator, there are places where they say, oh, you have to lock this door at night. And either you pay for a security guard to stand there all night, or you literally shut down your entire rig so you can turn off the generator and close that one door. And, shutting down your entire system the day before the show just because, you don't want to pay for a security guard to stand there is an expensive mistake.
Yep. Sky.
Well, and to Bill's point too, a lot of these office buildings are automated on their HVAC. So if you go in nights and weekends, you may get very either cold or very either hot, depending, or you get the noise because that's on a computer system somewhere.
And beyond, the technical parts of this, I'm just going to keep on underlining how important it is for you to be incredibly nice. You want to ask the questions, but when you're there, you are establishing your relationship with the location. The more organized you are, the more tight you are, the more perfect questions and all the questions that you need, but delivered in the nicest way you can possibly ask them. You're setting up how they're going to interact, how they're going to respond to your emails, to your phone, to your requests, to everything else. You're going to set that all up on that first visit. And so when you go in, you just have to, I find that people often underestimate. I mean, good producers don't underestimate that. A lot of people underestimate, even if they can be normally prickly in production, you'll see them put their best face on as they do that walkthrough with the venue, because being rough with the venue is not going to improve the quality of your event. Michael Fraley.
One other thing to keep in mind is wireless. I would highly recommend walking through with a wireless measuring device and seeing how loaded the area is.
Yep.
There are some areas, DFW, for example, we are just packed. So you got to know going into it, plus you've got to get with the house AV company and say, what frequencies are you guys using,
right,
in this date range, so that we know what we have to avoid, as far as that goes too.
And some points you end up with you do want to know what the other events are, and you may want to wander in when you're doing the other events to see whatever other people are using, just chit chat with the other production person to find out. We had one where we were in a hotel and we were using FreeSpeak, a lot of FreeSpeak. And, someone loaded into the ballroom next to us with a ton of FreeSpeak, and there's a limited number of channels that you can run on that platform in that frequency. There's nothing you can do about it other than you have to lower the resolution of your audio to get more channels out. We had to make those adjustments because, they didn't know we were there and we didn't know they were there. And so, those are things, sometimes they're unavoidable, but a lot of them are avoidable with a little bit of discussion.
And having a frequency coordinator.
Well, the problem is that you get frequency coordinators for your event. Oftentimes you don't have a frequency coordinator in a hotel. You won't have a frequency coordinator for all the events. It'll be for your event. And then they're not paying attention to the other event that's happening downstairs or somewhere else because it's not their rodeo. Go ahead, Michael Rogers. We have a lot of Michaels here.
And even to that, to the same event, you've got to also know who's on the other side of your air walls. Yep. I've done many of events where we're doing a rousing video production and there's a guy in the next room who's doing a small low-key sales operation. And so we couldn't get it moved one year, but the next year we were same two events at the same time, but they moved him to a different room across the hall. Yep. And so you have to be aware of that.
Yep. Next question.
Roscoe Jones is in with, how much do the power needs change from show to show? And what's the toughest venue you've had to have power issues with?
Yeah, I mean, the power needs change dramatically between shows, because it's an entirely different setup for those. I think that the hardest, Let me think about that. I'll let Bill answer. Let me think about.
Well, I was just going to note, I do think it's gotten a little bit easier, because back when I was doing a lot of corporate work, if you wanted to shoot an executive office and it was on the 40th floor, so you couldn't gel the windows, you had to bring in an HDMI and a huge power supply, and you were making sure you didn't trip breakers. The fact that we have energy efficient lighting that's portable and battery operated does make some of these things somewhat easier. I'm pretty confident that I can go into any location with just the battery operated stuff and do basic sound and basic lighting in a way that I couldn't a decade or two ago. So that's gotten a little bit better. But yeah, you need to know in advance what you're facing every time, regardless.
Good, Michael.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anybody ever heard of Delta Phase? I've done a number of events. Even I did one just actually a year and a half ago now, where the building was wired Delta Phase, and we had to go play that game. And a lot of people, you know, if they're in their 30s or younger, they don't even know what the heck that is. So
I think the hardest one we're doing a 4K surround sound projection for what ended up being 20,000 people in Battambang, Cambodia, and you know, they wanted to give us the line that was, you know, in the field, which was, you know, the wrong voltage, you know, and so and of course we were told we weren't able to do a walkthrough because they changed the venue at the last minute. So when we get there, then you're trying to find the generators, you know, like the day before the show, we're finding generators and getting them put in and then getting them worked out. That was probably the most difficult one. I mean, that show was probably one of the most difficult shows. People almost, you know, didn't make it. And the other one, in the Excel theater, we had one where the venue went out. We lost the power in the venue. The only thing that was left on was all of our computers. You know, they ran over and said, "What's happening to the stream?" And I said, "We're fine. Like, it's not us. It's not us." But everybody was in the dark, you know, because they had miscalculated the power draw. You know, to get to your point of things, you know, they had miscalculated power draw for that venue. For another Excel building, you know, in London, across the street, power would have been fine. In this more intimate space, power was not fine. And that was the thing, is they moved the space. They moved where they were going to do it between the racks, and didn't calculate for the change. Michael.
Yeah, I've done so many shows where we've gone into a venue where when we first hand out the pigtails for motors, it's a 4-wire connection, and they're using residential electricians who've never seen that before and have no idea how 3-phase works. And they say, "I've got to go get approval from my boss in order to connect this up." Yeah, they will say 5-wire, but 4-wire scares them.
I just want to say that also is, for those of you getting started, you want someone certified that really knows what they're doing with power. Power kills people. Like at the level that we're working on it, you know, and it's not something that you figure out on set. And it's not something that you take a class on. Like, we don't do shows where someone hasn't been doing this for a long time. You know, they were an apprentice for a long time before they got to actually plug anything in. And that's where you want the person managing your power distribution to come from. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, we sort of take it for granted that, you know, here in the US, you plug something into the wall and it's going to be 120 volts and it's going to be consistent. And, you know, and you have to realize there's so many places, even here in the US, that don't have clean power and don't have, you know, there are times when, you know, buildings will drop a phase, or, you know, so a lot of times for critical things, we'll come in with isolation transformers, plugging into, even though it says it's a, you know, 200 amp service, put an ISO transfer in just to clean it up, to make sure that, you know, we're covered there. And then of course have a backup generator.
In Africa, the number one damage to our computers, or to all of our equipment, is the power supplies, because it's just constantly fluctuating. And we have to, you know, we constantly are losing power supplies, you know, if they're there for any length of time. So being able to isolate and guarantee the power is super important. Mickey.
Yeah, and since we're in the topic of power, I don't know if it's something specific to here in the Philippines, but every single production here requires a generator or has a generator. We never ever use house power, and I don't know if that's just it's something we do here. But along the same lines, for smaller locations, and if you are shooting, if you're shooting stuff as opposed to having an event outdoors, it's important to designate where exactly these generators will be parked, because you don't want them right outside the window of the location where you're recording a very intimate interview. So that's one thing I have to deal with on a daily basis.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite quotes that sits in my office is from General Omar Bradley, and I've said it here quite a few times, but it's worth talking about. It's just said, amateurs talk about strategy, professionals talk about logistics. And it's, all of your shows will be a function of, a live show is a function of the logistics that happen beforehand, and not once you're in it, now you're just surviving. But the way the show goes started 6 weeks before, 6 months before, and figuring out where all those things are going to go and where all the tables are going to show up and where all the lines, and the more you do there, the smoother the experience is for the client. Next question.
Well, Sky wants to talk about his thing coming up. He says, I'm going to a barn today to build a studio. We'll be doing internet live event cooking and other events. So he's looking for thoughts. And he says, today's answers will help me build the studio.
So I've got an opportunity.
Look at the roof. It's a barn.
Okay. Keep talking. Keep going.
It's a barn. It's a barn. You have to look at the roof. I'm just telling you, you want to go over there when it's raining and go inside. I grew up on a farm. I grew up in barns, and I just know that I love the sound, but I would not love the sound if I was doing a production. And so it is, I've never been in a barn that didn't make a lot of noise when it was getting rained on, and you are in Seattle. It's not like you're in, Tucson.
Arizona. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So Mickey and then Bill.
And yeah, even without rain, with a lot of barns, in hotter climates or even in colder climates, as temperature changes, things will expand and contract and create clicking noises, which would be fun to clean up and post.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I thought of a weird one for you, Sky. Just because it's been a barn, you have no idea what's been stored in the barn. So I would go in the evening or something like that, take one of those tactical flashlights that you can make a beam out of, run around for a little bit, and then just turn it on in the dark and look at the air. And I just wonder if they've stored straw or hay there for a long time, and you've got people walking through it. You may get a lot of stuff, and your lighting may suddenly become visible.
This is a gentleman's barn, so it was built as a barn. It looks like a barn, but it holds his Harleys.
Oh, okay. So it's not a working practical barn that may be
even though it's got stables. There's never been a horse in it.
Got it.
But yes, thank you. That's a good point.
Ceiling height is going to be important for you. It's either too high or too low, but just know where that is. And again, in a barn, I would probably be building a box inside of a box. I don't know if I would, that's expensive. It doesn't really buy you a lot there, but I would be thinking about floating a room inside of it, floating a set inside of it, as opposed to.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and you'll need more floating if there's a metal roof.
Well, I realize too, there is a metal roof, but the office production studios is between us and the. I know. I'm not doubting you.
It's so loud. I've been in barns that have 2 or 3 floors, and when it rains, you can hear it everywhere.
That's a good point.
It's beautiful. I will say, it is a beautiful sound.
Very calming. We're doing Zen things.
I could sit. I used to just sit and listen to it, but I'm just, as someone who does audio, I just know that it's going to be a thing. Next question.
Chris Widener of Lafayette, Indiana says, I am crazy for wanting to do my site survey. Am I crazy for wanting to do my site survey at the same time of day as the event? No, I've gotten odd looks from more venue managers than I care to remember for asking.
It does depend on whether the big thing is do you have exposed windows? That's the biggest problem with that is if you have exposed windows in the venue, you definitely want to see it on the time of day that you're going to be there. Go ahead, Jason.
I'd say it depends on whether or not that gives you enough time to correct what you need to correct. And as long as it does, then sure.
The same time of day. So it could be 6 months ahead of time, just same time of day. Also know that same time of day, if it's too early, is different. Because, so the time of day where it's accurate will be 10 to 2. At 4 to 7 o'clock in the evening, if you check 6 months earlier, it will be a much different look than what you're going to get. And we've run into that as well, Joe.
Yeah, I would say ask the on-site if it's a normal day in that town, facility, whatever, because it may tell you other things too. How much traffic are you going to face coming
Right.
in or
And in
kind
a
of
large
exterior detail?
theater or a ballroom, it won't matter. I mean, it won't matter enough to really move everybody's schedule around. But in a place where you're going to have a lot of exposed windows, it becomes a more of a thing. Jason and then Roscoe.
Yeah, one last thing. Sun Surveyor for iOS is absolutely fantastic at tracking in real time. And again, get the location, it will calibrate, and oh boy, has it saved me. So yeah, Sun Surveyor is absolutely worth what it costs.
Couldn't live without it.
And you can do that for me, I use SketchUp. I'm a little less, so in SketchUp, you can visualize where the sun's going to go. And this gets back into you build a model of your space, and you turn the sun on, you'll get a really good sense of where things are going to be. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, well, on the sound side of things, I think it was mentioned earlier about the RF activity, and that changes like throughout the day. So it really helps to be able to bring something like an RF Explorer, a little RF, what do you call this, frequency analyzer, with a both an Omni antenna, carry an Omni, and also a LPDA, a directional antenna, and do scans at that time of the day when your shoot or event will happen. And also like if there's a school nearby and the event starts right when school ends, or say also keep track of flight paths, especially if you're doing something outdoors.
Trains also.
Yep. Yeah. And so again, it does help when you can spend a little time at a venue because of that process. So let's go to the next question. I have a hard out at 9.
Craig K at Toronto said, is there a workflow to take the LiDAR information from the iPhone into Vectorworks or SketchUp?
So the LiDAR that I'm using for those is not it's not a phone. So it's a scanner. For most venues, you don't really need anything more than a BLK 360, which will rent out at about $250 a week or something like that, or $250 for 3 days. So it's not, they've gotten to be much less expensive than they used to be. You don't need anything usually more than that. It's not perfectly accurate, but it's plus or minus a couple millimeters. So it's not like a, plus or minus 10 millimeters or something like that. So I think that usually you can get at distance, it's close up, it's much more accurate. So I'm using something more than, and then there are a variety of Autodesk tools for that to turn that to cut that back together. Go ahead, Jason.
Just one quick tip for those of you who have never used this interface. Hey Siri, what planes are above me right now? Take a look.
Next question.
Well, I think we've covered the Rick Bakos question, which was what's the schedule for the rest of the building, or ask the people in the building, what's the schedule for the rest of the building during the time you're going to be shooting there. So I think Joe dealt with that.
Okay, great. Is that it?
Mark Harder has one last one. Do not forget load out considerations. We were once locked out of the freight elevator after a job because the night was monthly linen delivery and pickup in Midtown Manhattan.
And plug the freezer back in.
Yes, if you've taken the refrigerator offline.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, and certainly one of the things to think about is what sort of cleanup process you need to have. A lot of places, they will assume that you're going to clean up all of your, cups, bottles, cans, trash, etc., and either take it down to their dumpster, or some places won't have dumpsters available to you. So, a couple of times we've actually gone in with a cleaning service after a large event and had hired our own cleaners to come in.
Yep.
And after one of them, the venue was so impressed that they decided, oh yes, we have to use these guys as our, event producers of record, because we spent a couple $100 to have a cleaning service come in after us. So it really makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of venues, some venues already are all lined up with their vendors. But remember that the person managing events also can make decisions about telling other clients about, oh, you need this kind of vendor. These are the right people to use. And that comes from how you treated them, how you treated the building, and the quality of your work. So it definitely makes a big difference. Mickey, real quick.
Yeah, real quick, just to add, figure out where each person in the crew and also the client side of things and talent will be stationed, like where the green room will be, where audio will set up their desks, where
where
Just so that
catering
there's
will
no-
be.
Exactly.
Craft services.
and power, and where everyone's going to charge their phones. Just remember where are people going to charge?
It's
their
always
phones?
where the
It's a
sound
huge-
mixer is.
Yeah,
It's always where the
exactly.
sound
No,
mixer is.
we put them on every table. So there's two. Actually, I have one of them here. It's got a bunch of it's got 5 outs. So it's your breakout and five things, and we buy all the cables for them, so they're all different, so that everyone can be served. Next, that's it. I have to jump quickly. So we're going to jump out. Thank you all. Thank you, Michael. It was great to see you here. It was great to have you join us. Hopefully we'll get you to come back every once in a while and talk about production with us. Thanks so much. And thanks to everyone else. Great questions, great answers there again, as always. And we'll see you all soon. I'll see you all tomorrow. All right. See you everybody.